So we have all of us here who are expected. We do have, you said Helen's joining us online? Is that... Okay.
And just as a reminder to commissioners, because we're not as used to the auditorium, because we've been upstairs generally, when you want to speak, you do need to turn your microphone on. Little button in front of you, the green light will be on if your microphone is on.
Yes. And very good. So we can get started. Welcome everyone. As a refresher, the emergency exits are both doors at the back of the room, and you can go either direction down the hallway to exit the building. Do we have any agenda changes suggested? Okay, we'll keep it as is. Open to the public for items not related to the agenda. Does anyone have anything? Or online? Okay, and you're not seeing anything over there, Kelsey? Okay, great. We can move right into announcements. Does anyone have any announcements? Quiet night, okay. Any additional, oh, Tim, go ahead. You wanna come up to the microphone? Or the podium, you're welcome to go to the podium.
1, press the mic button. 2, green light is on. Hi, Tim Barrett, City Council. Just want to make sure everybody knows that at the previous City Council meeting, we voted 3-1 with 1 recusal to proceed forward with the paving of the bike path across Hubbard Park and build the 18-car parking lot with 4 handicap spots and 4 regular 120-volt, 14-foot lighted, pedestrian style street lights inside that park, and that was a bid for that, and that then I think they'll be able to start construction hopefully in late spring. So that's just want to let you know that.
And repeat the park name, just so we all got it.
Say again.
Repeat the park name. Hubbard.
Hubbard. So that's the north-south bike connector that would go from Nolan Farm Road all the way down into South Point. And so from South Point, you would be able to get out on their road to Spear Street and then just go a little bit to North Jefferson. And then hopefully in the future, would be able to connect along an easement on the Long property to go directly to North Jefferson. So you could go from South Village all the way to Nolan Farm Road. And then if you go down through that neighborhood, you would get to a new bike path that's along the tree line in Spear Meadows. And then that would take you to a new crossing that's going to connect over to the bike paths across Swift Street. So
great. Thanks for the update.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Very exciting. Any other items open to the public not related to the agenda? Okay. Any other announcements? Any additional staff items?
Nothing in addition, just noting that I had included in the memo that at that same City Council meeting, City Council approved an additional allocation of funds for the Parks and Open Space Master Plan to support the reboot of that process with a new consultant. And I just wanted to be clear with this commission that it is not a sort of starting from scratch situation. The intent is that the new consultant will be using as much of the previous public outreach and input that they had received over last summer, any analysis or mapping that they can reuse. And so we're kicking that off with them on this coming Friday to start that process of figuring out what can be reused and then moving forward from there. So it won't be a lot of public meetings. It won't be redoing all of that. It's more moving directly into the analysis portion of that project. And then the Planning Commission related committees will end up seeing first drafts of the report in a few months.
Very good. Thank you, Kelsey. So I guess we can move on to item number 5, which is the Mary Street and Williston Road intersection project, which we did have a very nice presentation in our packet already. If you want to come on up and get your mics on, you can.
Either way is good. I figured if I'm here, then
make sure you turn the mic on. If it's not.
Is there a little green light?
From here, it's a little bit easier to address both the public and the commission, if that works for you. Is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just making sure that you have the green light on, and that
Green
you're
light is on.
and that you're speaking fairly close to the microphone.
Sounds good. Thank
Thanks.
Green to bright green.
Great. So I'm
so
not
just as we-
whoever's going to start, go right ahead.
I'm just going to give like a really, probably to tell you guys what you already know. My name is Christine Ford. I'm a transportation planner with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. This project is part of the work program, the CCRPC annual work program. We have federal planning dollars that we can use for transportation planning studies around the county. So that's funding this study. We have hired Stantec to do this work, working with Erica, working with Paul, and Erica may want to say a few words about it also. But it's a process that VTrans has established called scoping. Sean is going to talk about that a little bit more, where we're just kind of trying to get public input, your input, try to come up with creative ideas for what to do with this intersection. So that is my 2 cents, and I'll turn it over to Erica.
Yeah, I'll give a little bit of the context from the city standpoint. So I'm Erica Quallentoll, Deputy Director of Capital Projects. I sit over at Public Works. Realize I think this is my first Planning Commission meeting. I have been with the city for this getting close to 4 years, so I'm very surprised I haven't been here. So the background of the study, like Christine said, we submitted through the planning, the UPWP. You all approved it. You knew this was going there. And can you just go to the next? Great. So for some context here, there are 2 kind of study areas, the primary study area and the secondary study area, primary in the darker magenta, secondary in the larger and the lighter. And so that we have a few different objectives for this project, but really it's about improving this area as a whole from a traffic, congestion, safety, active transportation mobility standpoint. And in this area, obviously there are so many changes going on, especially as the form-based code and LDRs have now allowed for much more height in this area. How do we plan for improvements in the 5-year time frame, but then also thinking about what this area could look like in 15, 20, 30 years and making sure we have the network to accommodate that. And the ask for you all tonight is going to be around our purpose and needs statement, which is really the guide for this whole project. And we are asking for your input on our current draft one, and ideally get a formal endorsement of the purpose and need statement. If there are enough things that you want adjusted, we can certainly, I can just come back to you with that, or go through Kelsey for that. But that is really the ask for tonight. But overall, looking for your input. We're still very early on in this process, so nothing is off limits at this point. So I'll pass it over to Sean, who's gonna take you through the whole thing.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Christine. Thank you to the Planning Commission and members of the public, both in person and online. I'm Sean Neely, Project Manager with Stantec. With me tonight are some of my Stantec teammates, Jackie LeBlanc, Lead Planner, and Amanda Svensson, Designer on this project. Just to point out some of the connections on the road, you know, Erica mentioned some of the planned streets. In the darker maroon, we see the upcoming connection of Garden Street and Midas Drive to be made later this year. At White Street and Midas Drive, that is a future project for realigning that intersection. In navy blue, we see some of the currently proposed and in design shared use paths, including the shared use path that's currently in design along the south side of Williston Road, planned shared use paths along Dorset Street and Market Street, and connecting to the future pedestrian bicycle bridge over Interstate 89.
Sean, I'm going to give the caveat that Paul has been giving every time we look at this graphic, just to make sure, especially because I know this is going to be archived and go on YouTube and all sorts of things, that the streets that are being shown and then on the legend that say official map planned street, you all know this because you are well versed in the official map, but just want to make it clear that none of those planned streets, other than the ones in red, we are not actively pursuing them, especially want to call attention to the one through the school. There is no active plan for that to happen. These are on the official map. So if something big were to change in the future, that is there. But no active plans on any of these through parcels that are not our own.
Thank you, Erica. And as part of this scope of this study, we will be making some recommendations for potential updates to the official map. So this slide just shows the context of this study and the overall project implementation process. This is a scoping study, also known as the project definition phase, where we define what it is this project is about and why we're doing it. That's encapsulated in what we refer to as the purpose and needs statement, which we'll review shortly. We are collecting data and analyzing existing conditions, looking out for or reaching out for community input. And then based on all of that, we'll develop solutions, a range of alternatives to address the purpose and needs. And we will evaluate those alternatives based on how well they meet the purpose and need. And once a preferred alternative is selected, then this project can then be used to pursue funding for engineering, design, and construction of improvements. So here we have our full draft purpose and needs statement. Again, this is meant to encapsulate what this project is trying to accomplish and why. There's a lot of text on this. It's the only slide with this much text, but as Erica pointed out, we are looking for feedback from the Planning Commission and ideally an endorsement. Currently it is in draft format, and we're able to make refinements as needed. So with that, I will read through it. Yes.
I just have a functional question about, so I know one of the things that you're asking us to do tonight is to review, potentially make changes, and then potentially approve this. Is it the blue box and then all 3 green boxes? I just want to make sure we understand, like, what is the thing
Yes.
that we're reviewing and possibly approving?
Good question. So the blue box is the purpose and the green boxes are the needs. So with that, the purpose of the Williston Road, Hotel, and Mary Street intersection scoping study is to develop intersection improvement alternatives to address future growth and the mobility, safety, and connectivity for all transportation users in the vicinity and east of the intersection to Patchen Road and Hinesburg Road. There is a need to support multimodal transportation through and around the intersection. City Plan 2024 Goal 42 is to complete and maintain the network for bike pedestrian travel by connecting shared use paths, bicycle pedestrian infrastructure, pedestrian trails, sidewalks, and roadways internally and to neighboring municipalities' networks. Action 72 from that plan is to undertake design and capital planning to reorient Williston Road in city center to local and non-vehicular users. As city center continues to develop, The street grid network is built out, and the Williston Road streetscape from Dorset Street to Patchen Road and Hinesburg Road is transformed into a pedestrian, bicycle, and transit-oriented downtown. Intersection improvements along the corridor need to support multimodal circulation while also safely accommodating high vehicle volumes through one of the busiest corridors in Vermont. There is a need to enable infill development and redevelopment. City Plan 2024, Action 141, is to continue to focus city resources on nimbly developing city center as South Burlington's downtown. Infrastructure improvements in line with the city center form-based code and the city's official map will support future private investments for people to live, work, and play here, addressing local and regional housing demand and transitioning away from car-centric development. And finally, there is a need to improve access management. City Plan 2024 Goal 47 is to support access to and function of regionally significant transportation systems consistently with the land use goals of this plan. The number of access drives along Williston Road, from Mary Street to White Street creates additional conflicts among drivers, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Recommendations will be in line with city and state access management best practices.
I have a question about that last one. The part that's in the city plan is just the part that's in the parentheses, and then the second part that's specific to Mary Street is what you've added to like be specific to the area.
That's correct.
I one question on what physical where like the physical limits of this.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the first question was on the graphic that we showed at first. It has the secondary study area expanding to Midas, but then the statement has it to Hinesburg. So which one are we doing?
That's a great question. I apologize for the mismatch. We had started with it going to White Street, and it has been updated to go to Patchen Road, Hinesburg Road. We will update this map to reflect that.
Okay, thank you. And then a follow-up question to that is, I guess I am intrigued. I guess when I sort of think of this as a corridor, sort of, I kind of think of the area between Dorset and Hinesburg as sort of a chunk that has kind of similar characteristics on both sides. So I'm kind of curious on the decision to have it extend east to Hinesburg, but not west to Dorset Street as a secondary study area.
That's a great question. Erica?
Yeah, I'll jump in with that a little bit. So the thought behind the kind of primary and secondary is we're looking to get a different set of recommendations. In the primary study area, that is a much more physical, shorter term, immediate recommendation around the traffic signal specifically. It's been in conversation for a long time of should it be where it is right now? Should it move to Mary Street when it opens up? And how that should be aligned and more of the physical geometry and operationally how that should work. So that is its own very specific recommendation that we would like to take relatively quickly into design and construction. And in that secondary study area, it's much more about how it fits in with some of those planned streets and especially access management as we think about the way this area might change. So that's not to say that access management recommendations couldn't be made to the west of the area. It's this project started as we need to figure out this signal And then we're like, hold on, this signal interacts so directly with all of these driveways and the way that the corridor operates from an access management standpoint. And so that's when that primary study area came into play. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
I guess just to follow up to what Colin said, like it feels like that cyan, bright blue line on the other side of the Delta Hotel feels important to the conversation. So just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, I mean, you're kind of almost like two sides of the same building. So I don't.
Sure, that's a good point. And so that is from the official map. It is less than it's only a couple of hundred or so feet from the intersection of Dorset Street and Williston Road, and it is showing it connecting at Williston Road at the access point that is one of the drives of Delta Hotel that is not signalized. And so some can, it's something to be considered. Also, it's to be considered within the context of how close it is to Dorset Street, both along Williston Road and Market Street.
Since you brought up the that cyan dotted line on the west side of Delta Hotel, I guess this is the same presentation that was at the public hearing, and there was another conversation which is reflected on the first slide a lot more, if you want to go back to that one, that it's actually where it says access drive, that's actually a not legal but frequently used access point currently, because it is at a light. That the light is there, and it's used by both the Windjammer and the Delta Hotel, but it's also used to access the the other businesses and public places behind behind the Delta Hotel. So that was actually kind of a revelation there, and it's like, wow, I know it's a private access drive, but that's the way people want to go. So you shouldn't really ignore that is the way people want to go currently.
And we do have some slides later on in the presentation that illustrate just that.
Yeah. Thanks.
We might be getting ahead of ourselves. You can.
So at this point, we could move forward with a presentation unless there's any other comments specifically from the Planning Commission on this slide for the purpose of need. Okay. This slide shows average daily traffic among different segments of roadway in the area. This data was collected in 2022. It represents the average traffic on a given day. It's referred to as average annual daily traffic. And so back in 2022, along the primary study area and most of the secondary study area, there were about 28,000 vehicles traveling that segment each day. Just west of there on Williston Road at Dorset Street, in 2022, there were 39,000 vehicles traveling there each day, which does represent, I think, the busiest segment of roadway, or the highest volume segment of roadway in the state that's non-interstate roadway. We see Dorset Street was about 22,000 vehicles. As you move east past White Street along Williston Road, the volumes decrease down to 18,000 and then 15,000 on Williston Road east of Patchen Road and Hinesburg Road. something to note about the volume shown for Market Street, those were recorded back in 2022 when there were less than 2,000 vehicles shown, 1,800 vehicles. And since then, of course, there has been substantial development, and so we would expect current volumes to be quite a bit higher. But this just gives us overall context of some of the traffic in the area. Here we summarize crash data specifically at the two existing intersections, one at the signalized hotel drives and the other at the stop-controlled intersection of Mary Street and Williston Road. These data are for the 5-year period of 2020 to 2024. There were 29 total crashes during that period at the hotel drives and almost half as many, 16, at Mary Street. The crash patterns at the hotel drives were namely angle crashes, angle and broadside, as well as rear end and side swipe, which are common among congested areas like this at an intersection with such high volumes and 4-lane arterial. At Mary Street, the overarching pattern was angle crashes, and that's also not surprising, seeing it is a stop-controlled intersection at a 4-lane arterial with such high volumes. Fortunately, no fatalities were recorded during this time period at these two intersections. There were 4 injuries recorded overall, 3 at the hotel drives and 1 at Mary Street. No crashes involving pedestrians or bicycles were recorded. At Mary Street, there was 1 crash involving a heavy truck and 1 involving a motorcycle.
Is there any data on how many of those were people trying to cross the center line to make left turns, or
Sure.
because I mean it just seems like it's I don't know who dares do that, try to make a left turn onto Williston Road.
That's a great question, and so in order to get that specific in the data, we would have to request from the state the report narratives and then go through the report narratives to look for more details. We did not do that. However, you make a great point, and that's exactly the assumption that we would make, is that with that pattern of angle crashes at this specific intersection, it is likely that a number of those are related to making a left turn either from Mary Street onto Williston Road or from Williston Road onto Mary Street.
Yeah, I'm looking at the ones that are closest to the central school out on Williston Road in front of that. Isn't there like fast food restaurants right there?
Yep, we did not analyze those crashes. We just looked at right at the 2 intersections. Mm-hmm. But we have heard anecdotally that over the years there have been not only a number of crashes, but even vehicles that have crashed into some of the buildings and businesses along Williston Road in this area. This figure shows some of the land use patterns in the area. And so we can see some conventional single-use type developments along the Williston Road corridor, namely commercial retail development, compared with the mixed-use development along Market Street. We also see the single-family residential homes along Mary Street and some of the institutional buildings, including the elementary school, as well as City Hall. We have a typo on there for City Hall, and we will address that. It might be hard for some folks in the audience to see, but we do have an approximation of how far one could walk if you started out front of the door here on Market Street and walked for about 5 minutes to give a sense of how close these different areas are for a pedestrian. Here we look at walkability related to transit stops. So each of the transit stops shown has an approximated 3-minute walk time radius around it. And so from that, we see that there are some gaps along Williston Road compared with other street segments in the area, and possibly some opportunities there. Here we look at the frontage of buildings. And so for buildings that have a solid red line across it that represents a more continuous facade with several access points, for example, what's shown along Market Street. The red dots are individual entrances, and we can see those are more common along some of the development along Williston Road. And so those types of patterns of land use development tend to correlate more with automobile trips to get to and among the different land uses and businesses, compared to having more continuous facades. Here we look at building setbacks. So the light orange shows how far from the roadway different buildings are. We can see some of the newer development along Market Street are quite close, and compared to development along Dorset Street and Williston Road, where the buildings are set back quite a bit further from the road, generally with surface parking lots between the buildings and the roadway, and those parking lots generally don't have designated routes for pedestrians, and so again that lends itself more to automobile trips versus being able to or willing to park once and visit several establishments, or just walk there from the start. And here we show general age of development in the area. So the darker building footprints represent newer development, while the lighter colors represent older development. And so, this might help us understand what are likely to be some of the properties to be redeveloped in the next 5 to 10 years. And, thinking about it in the context of expecting some substantial growth or development along Williston Road over the next decade or more.
Are you taking questions?
We can. We'll, sure.
Yeah. I wonder if we should finish the slides first, if that's...
Yeah, we will have a time to open up.
Do you have just a clarifying question about what you're seeing? Okay. Yeah, so it's actually a good point. I meant to bring this up too. The version that's in our packet, you can't see the legend. So maybe before it gets posted somewhere, you might want to reprint it so you can get the legend included.
Thank you. I noticed that this afternoon, and so this is actually a modified version, and I'll make sure that Erica has a copy of it so that it can be updated for the site.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah. But yeah, we will be opening it up for questions and discussion after a few more slides. So looking at some of the existing conditions, as was mentioned, it is popular currently for motorists to travel between Williston Road and Market Street by way of the existing signalized intersection at the hotel drives, and following that parking lot access way southerly down towards the Department of Motor Vehicle Complex and through their parking lots and access ways. Also shown is the location of the current temporary barrier at the southerly end of Mary Street, made up of concrete barriers, which the city is currently planning to remove in order to open up Mary Street from Williston Road to Market Street at the same time, or once Garden Street is connected to Midas Drive. Here we see a common use of the Hotel Drive's signal in order to access Mary Street and prevent having to deal with a stop-controlled intersection at that 4-lane arterial. So, particularly if you're making a left onto Mary Street or a left onto Williston Road, it's common to use the bank parking lot as a route from Mary Street to the approaches of the signalized Hotel Drive intersection. Looking at that signalized intersection at the hotels currently, this shows the lane configurations on Williston Road. There are protected left turn phases. However, there are no left turn lanes. And so if the first vehicle in the queue is making a left, they're able to make use of that protected phase. If not, then there's additional lost time associated with each cycle. Another observation that we made on site in the mid-morning was that for the crosswalk, that there's one crosswalk over Williston Road at this location on the easterly side of the intersection. It does turn on every cycle. It is exclusive, meaning that no vehicles are receiving a green light during the pedestrian phase. So that's an opportunity to make some adjustments.
Sean, I should have caught this on the slide. I did not. There's currently a software issue with our ped buttons, and so it's picking up people driving by as a pedestrian call. It is something we have dealt with before, so that one will get fixed so that it will be only when someone pushes it. But it is, yeah, I should have caught that sooner. I missed that one.
No problem. Thanks for the update.
Yeah.
Now, looking at the side street or the Hotel Drive approaches to this intersection, they are a bit offset from one another, and particularly the through movements are not well aligned with the receiving lanes, particularly for the southbound through movement. And so this can lead to a bit of dancing among motorists, making movements through or around this intersection from those side drives, I should say. And here's the Mary Street stop-controlled intersection at Williston Road, and across the road are entrances to the plaza. Those entrances are a bit offset from the Mary Street approach. Here's a representative snapshot of of the existing sidewalk condition along Williston Road. So there are portions that are in need of repair, that are missing concrete, that do have drainage issues, water, mud, and ice in the winter, and can be quite challenging for pedestrians in general, particularly folks using wheelchair, power chairs, or walkers or other devices. And here we're looking southbound on Mary Street with the recently constructed sidewalk along the westerly portion of that roadway. And now I'll pass it off to my colleague Jackie.
so I hadn't really thought through writing on the board and using the speaker here, but we'll make it work. So now we'd really like to hear questions, comments, concerns from Planning Commission members and members of the public. I recognize some of you from the open house we had recently, and we're really grateful for the feedback we heard from you then. And we have some prompt questions up here for some of the key things we've been thinking about as a project team, and would love to just open it up to folks. Yeah, we can just do that.
We can open it up to questions. I don't know if anybody's waiting for anybody up here or anything.
Yeah, I would say I think we should start with the commission. It is your meeting.
Yeah,
and then
that's
we'll
fair.
open it up.
I'm not seeing anything up here right now. Yeah, Duncan, you want to go ahead?
Turn your mic on. I do have one question. The cut through with the hotel. I'm assuming that's all privately. I believe that's all privately owned. So
Kelsey's nodding.
yeah. So I'm not sure how we would go about if we said that's the preferred option. Is that a purchase? I'm just wondering what in my mind, like how would that happen? Or is that just we have to eventually? Because I know that the landlord Peter Judge, who owns the building right here, tried to sign off the back way that people use to cut through there. So he's trying to tamp down on the amount of traffic using that.
Erica, do you want to talk about the scope of the project versus sort of land acquisition and how that would, where does this project sit in sort of the bigger picture of land use in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So the land use piece of it is something that's really informing what we want to come out of this study with for recommendations. If it's something where we look at and say the current location of X official map street, we should look at maybe bringing it into Y because it will facilitate access management. It makes the signal serve the more logical route. Recommendations like that can definitely come out of it. And then it would be as redevelopment happens or as the opportunities for any private component, or if there were an option for the city to work with the landowner there. But so coming out of this study, we're not necessarily looking at all of the routes people might take and saying you should go ahead and pursue land acquisition for this. But it could be something where you say this is a really common route, so it makes sense to keep the signal where it is and adjust the official map accordingly. Or it could be something like the signal shouldn't be here. It's not a public route. It should be over at Mary Street, for example. So we're trying to keep the recommendations right along Williston Road, but then if there are some of those other kind of tertiary recommendations of saying this one official map street might not be in the best location, it should move over here. I think that is something that is within the scope of it, but really in the context of the signal and access management along Williston Road. Did you have anything else, Kelsey?
No, does that help, Duncan?
I guess
to add a little bit of land use to it, they're talking about where the signal should be, and it's a little bit chicken or egg, where right now people are using the cut through the Delta Hotel because the signal is there. But if the signal is in a different location, whether it's shifted by 20 feet or if it's at Mary Street or if it's somewhere else completely, what does that do to where people are going to choose to turn or get through from one place to another? It may encourage or discourage different routes off of the intersections, but it's not necessarily saying, oh, the best way to get to Market Street from Williston Road should be this back way through the hotel, so therefore that's going to tell us where to put the intersection. It's talking about the best places for the intersection and then sort of cross-checking that with the routes that would branch off from it.
Yeah, I think just one other small point is that What Stantec has been told is to kind of think outside of the box. I mean, the land use is for you, for the city. They're just trying to use their traffic expertise to try to, you know, make suggestions for you guys to decide.
And I will just add one more thing related to that is that we have been in discussion with some of the adjacent business owners. We haven't heard back from the hotel owners, but are expecting to be able to connect with them at some point during this project.
Great. Colin?
So I guess no. First, thanks for giving this presentation. This is really good stuff to learn about. I guess one thing in terms of scope is, in terms of off the table, like we talk about where should the signal be, is doing something like, splitting it into two nearby three-way signals instead of one four-way signal. Essentially, I could see some possible, I'm just brainstorming possible ideas that you could potentially get more capacity out by splitting into essentially two three-ways instead of one four-way. And part of why I bring that up, I guess, is not to say that is what I'd endorse at all. I haven't done any modeling on that, but I wonder if it would make sense to be explicit on here about what the kind of long-term expectations for this area are, and making sure that whatever we're doing here is compatible with that vision. And perhaps with a slightly more fine point on it, like, for pedestrian, it would be awesome if we could reduce the number of travel lanes on this section of roads. I'm aware, realistically, we've got 27,000 vehicles that's going to back up all the way to UVM if you try that tomorrow with this project. However, I could see situations where, as either our land use departments or, frankly, as we keep building out our street grid network, where we might see a drop-off in the amount of the amount of vehicles going down Williston Road, to the point where perhaps larger, kind of more grand changes could be possible. And I guess I would love to see this study being really make sure, okay, best case scenario, we can really make some changes to Williston Road. Is what we're doing here compatible with that vision? So we could just put some stripes down, move some heads around, and then make some really cool things. We don't want this, for example, intersection. We wanted this really cool thing, but that's the same way 20 years ago. That's a real big bottleneck on the corridor. We need a couple more billion. I guess I just want to, and that's sort of why I bring up the idea of like more capacity over two adjacent three ways. Maybe that would help or something. But I think what I'm trying to say is making sure that this project could be compatible with a more optimistic future, and this doesn't become the limiting factor, and actually model that out. Thanks.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. So a couple of things, right now, as was mentioned, anything is on the table. We're open to talking about anything. The intersection configuration that you were describing kind of reminds me of, the new signal down at Lakeside and Champlain Parkway. It's kind of, split, just as like a local example. In terms of, looking at this in the context of the vision for the next several decades, you nailed it on the head. That's exactly what we're trying to do, and that's why the purpose and need statement, calls out specific portions of the city plan, that's looking towards the future, and both in the context of what Williston Road could look like, but also in terms of the amount of likely development over the upcoming decades. The height restriction is going up to potentially 12 stories. The city currently has 7,500 housing units with a target of 10,000 housing units. So yes, we are very much trying to look at this in terms of setting up, supporting future development along this area.
We have Commissioner Helen Reilly joining. You have your hand up, Helen.
Yes. So to piggyback, I guess, on Colin's thinking ahead, when I look at the map and I understand the secondary, the kind of mustard colored potential roadway in front of the windjammer. We've been talking about that for a very long time. And I do notice that there's that same colored line kind of lines up with Mary Street. So if that, and I think there's a lot of good reasons to consider in the future that Mustard Road, just to access some infill and move traffic and people. But I also think it makes some sense with lining up with Mary Street, and maybe it gives that signalization there an extra boost or a thought in terms of long-term, rather than do it somewhere else and then in 20 years we move it. But, and I also wonder if with that back road, if that's the kind of development of transportation development that would reduce the number of curb cuts along Williston Road and cut down on some of that traffic as well. So it's just a thought. I know we're not here to say, yeah, we should put in that secondary road, but I think it has some relevance to the discussion long-term.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We are definitely looking to receive any ideas from the public or the commission at this time. You know, I'll make two minor comments in terms of that mustard yellow road that's showing aligned with Mary Street. That particular alignment with Mary Street might be challenging based on recent discussions with the landowner of the building that is showing that it's going through on the north side of Williston Road, but something within that area that comes down to Williston Road could be a possibility. And having a road behind some of those properties would allow the movement among those properties without having to access Williston Road if you're moving in a motor vehicle or otherwise.
Donna?
Yeah, this team from Stantec has heard this before, but I thought I'd bring it up so the folks on the commission, just a different perspective about the walkability and pedestrian friendliness of streets. I mean, we've tried hard to make Market Street more pedestrianized, but it's still largely a road that's hard to control traffic speed on. And there's an opportunity, I think, that Mary Street could be that more pedestrianized, where cars are the ones that aren't quite as welcome there. They can be there, but they really have to, it's much more pedestrian friendly. And it would kind of provide any future development there with different flavor. Something that's like developments along walkable paths tend to be closer. I mean, I always think European, because the streets there are always sort of narrow and things come up close to the street and everything. But, it's the kind of place that makes you want to stroll, and not a street that's largely dominated by traffic, because the last thing we really need there is just another fast-paced road, passing through. And as difficult as it might be to, make that a public access road along the Delta, between the Delta and Windjammer, they're already there. They kind of have an established usage pattern there. Whereas, Mary Street right now, it's like everybody thinks of it as being a pathway, because you can't drive through anyway. But it could also lead to some future thinking about, can we make a really special place in South Burlington that really is pedestrian?
I guess I would say that we don't always get it right the first time. So like, just because it's on the official map, like, don't, don't be shy about making a different suggestion, because I think that those specific locations for roads were taken from like the previous Williston road study, which isn't that old, but now that you're diving in, there might be some better thinking or newer thinking. So yeah, just keep an open mind. You're the experts here. So
The other thing I just kind of wanted to, it just tonight, in looking at that map, it makes me think a little bit about the issues we have on Shelburne Road at not Farrell. What's the name of that crossing street? Fayette. Yeah, it's like that it's kind of a key crossing point of a major roadway, and a place where even the state on Shelburne Road is kind of focusing that that's where you really have to pay attention to pedestrians. It's kind of the key spot. This is that spot on Williston Road too. If you're going to have one place where pedestrians feel welcome to cross the street, that could be it. And that could actually lead to some real potential nice ideas for uses north of Williston Road too. It might even create some more potential for development over there, which also takes advantage of that potential pedestrian traffic from the rest of Market Street and Garden Street.
Anything else from commissioners before we
Just
John?
a couple things that I agree with most of the comments that have been made. Center turn lane, I don't know how big a right of way is. Barring that, given some of the crash data, do we want to consider no left turns out of some of those businesses? Solid median, so you can't make a left turn. Some things to maybe calm the churn in the traffic a little bit. I always thought it was odd that intersection was sitting at two private driveways. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense from a traffic standpoint. So I think we either want to align the signal with Mary or align the road with the access drives. But as it is now, it's very peculiar. And maybe I'm insane, but the left turn movement at that light, does it go every cycle?
Yeah, the tree needs to be trimmed right now. The tree is triggering the detection. So it sees a branch and it thinks it's a car. But it is set up that if someone is in the lane that you would take a left from, even if you are going straight, because the detection can't see if you have a blinker on, unfortunately. It would be nice if it knew. So it does come up anytime there is a person in that lane. And so the one to take a left into the windjammer leads it with that through traffic. Then they stop, and for the last 7 to 10 seconds, the westbound traffic gets that left.
Okay, because I could swear I'd been at that light before where it didn't trigger, but it might have just been random.
It also got updated to do that leading and lagging just a few months ago. So
okay.
It was very finicky with how, and they would come up, but you couldn't go through, so one car could block it. But so yeah.
Okay. And then, as you mentioned, left turn, if we keep that, left turn lanes would be hugely beneficial at that point. But yeah, I think particularly if they're going to remove the barrier at Mary Street, it's going to call for more traffic going through there. And I think we may be setting ourselves up for a lot more problems if we just leave that stop sign and people are trying to make that turn. I think we might have problems with that. So those are my thoughts.
Appreciate it.
One more quick thought as well. I wasn't exactly sure to what degree we're looking at the secondary area, study area. Is like adding, like I'm noticing at the moment we have about 1,200-foot gap between crosswalks there, which is way higher than you want in an urbanized area. Is adding a mid-plot crossing part of the scope of this, or is that more of a wish listing that wouldn't be included here?
Yes to both. And so part of why that additional, I guess we've been saying Cyan Street on the official map is to create another opportunity for a crossing there. We will next year when White Street gets realigned, that one will at least have crosswalks on all approaches, but still it would be that huge gap. And so I think that something like a mid-block crossing couldn't happen in the absence of some access management through there because there is just the chaos of all of those turns. But looking at a good spot for that based on what we can do around access management is absolutely within what we're looking at here.
Cool. Yeah. I guess my final point would be whatever we do, I would love to see if there's ways we can fix this without expanding roadways. For example, like need be jug handles or some creative ways using existing network would definitely be. I'd love to see that without having to add more pavement to this neighborhood already. But yeah, I don't think it really changes the purpose statement much. Thank you.
Happy to know we don't have enough right of way to add any more lanes.
So I think we've heard from all of the commissioners at least something. Did you have something else, Duncan? Or
I just real quick.
Yeah.
Erica, you refresh my Route 2 is not our Williston Road is not ours to add a lane to, right? It's the state's.
It's a mix of things. So it's a class 1 town highway. So we are responsible for maintenance, but any larger construction is the state's responsibility. We can come up with a project and ask permission, get a permit. We led the signal construction at Market and Hinesburg. We applied for that permit, but it's on a state route, not even a class 1, and they'll own it after. So they're going to own it when it's 100% done. So it's an in-between land when it's a class 1. We can, but it's difficult and we need very robust permission.
Well, I know you had the list of questions, and I think we have some people who are probably interested in the audience. I don't know if anyone is interested in a question or comment.
And name members of the audience who wish to speak. If you can just approach a microphone, there's at the table here next to Erica or up at the podium.
And then you would make sure to state your name too.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
I am CJ and I live on Mary Street. And at the last meeting, I was heartened to hear so many folks in the public. It seemed an overwhelming sentiment to keep Mary Street closed to through traffic. So that was nice to hear. But it sounds like the decision has already been made to open Mary Street to through traffic. And it sounds like maybe we have about a year, more or less, before it gets opened up. Is that accurate?
So likely this fall, if construction goes to plan on the Garden and Midas connection, that tying those together happened a while ago. I don't know when exactly it was, okay. But that is planned for this fall or winter.
So maybe about a year before it goes from about maybe less than 100 cars a day to maybe upwards of 2,000 to 3,000 cars per day. If you look at the numbers on Market Street from the earlier slide. So yeah, that's a huge difference for our little neighborhood. It's going to change the dynamic of Mary Street completely to open it up like that. And it looks like it's already going to happen. There's really nothing that we can do about it. So my question is, given that we're going from maybe less than 100 cars a day to 2,000 or 3,000 cars a day in just maybe the next year or so on our street, how are we putting in speed bumps? How are we going to keep these cars from, hitting our kids and running over our cats and right, pulling all the normal stuff that we do? How are we going to slow these cars down specifically? Are we doing speed bumps?
So I want to make sure. So tonight we're going to focus more on Williston Road, but to answer your question, there can definitely be recommendations made from this study around that. And I'm especially thinking, I think it came up around changing where left turns are allowable. So it wouldn't be as convenient for many directions if you wanted to go left. But there are definitely options for a speed table.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's plans to open it up. But there's no plans for traffic calming. That's what I'm hearing. I hope that you guys can come up with some plans for traffic calming at the same time as you plan to open the street.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Tim?
Hi, Tim Barrett again. Has there been a traffic analysis of the current conditions at the hotel intersection? Like the performance of the intersection by a traffic analysis and observation to see how it backs up at what times of day and which lanes could be improved with some signalization and signage that doesn't exist today? That's a pretty primitive style intersection. It doesn't really have, doesn't have sensors that are above ground. They're all below ground, I believe. It doesn't have any, signage on this lane is a through lane, this lane is a left lane. There's nothing on the ground because I think that intersection was an afterthought when the businesses developed across the street, probably. So I was just curious if that information exists, might help you to determine how to improve the intersection and what technologies might be available to make it flow better. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. As part of this study, there were turning movement counts collected at the hotel drives, and we have done some existing conditions traffic analysis, and it has indicated queue lengths forming during the peak periods. However, it actually has shown a little bit better operations than we expected. However, based on observations on site, as well as just looking at the overall picture, there are definitely opportunities for improving that intersection, even if it were to stay at the same location. There are definitely ways that we could improve the configurations, the phasing, the timing, and detection to improve that intersection where it is today. Thank you.
However, I'm a lot shorter than Sean is. Ryan Doyle. I think that this isn't the type of intersection that is not going to be fixed the first time. There are a lot of issues with Williston Road and its usage and what it's trying to accommodate as a road, as a transportation corridor. So one of the things I want to bring up is the way that we have been installing lights in South Burlington. You'll notice that they're all black and they have quite a cantilever form. That is the most expensive way to build traffic lights. In a lot of other states, you will see them many feet from the roadway because they're envisioning possibly adding a lane in the next 20 years. And those are built so industriously and with such a deep foundation that they don't want to remove them. The next tier down is when you have one of those grayish metal poles, but then you have a string, a cable supporting the lights. And then the tier down from that is when you have a wooden pole holding lights. Those are cost differences. And everything we build in South Burlington are these really expensive, deep foundation type of traffic lights. And we just did it over here at the end of Market Street. Everybody knows that that intersection was not designed to accommodate people who are outside of cars. There's a very wide crossing. It shouldn't be that way, but we put in a very expensive pole system. And every time the council makes a decision to put in infrastructure like that, what they are saying is that we will not improve that in their lifetime. That is a very big investment. We don't change them once they're there. And so when you start looking around at the infrastructure we build, we're building it to finality and not to the transition it's in. A lot of what's around city center, because we don't know where all the development's going to be, I think this official map is in very poor shape. We don't know where these roads are going to be. If we keep committing decades-long light infrastructure, then we are more hamstringing ourselves in the future. So I want to advocate for using the cheaper forms of these things. I think one of the issues we're going to find in this area in the long term is that a lot of the properties don't have perpendicular lines to the road. And when we look at these small properties, when you look at historic places like St. Albans, right, we have these narrow lots, but all the buildings are touching, all of the lots are perpendicular to the road. You can get really good coverage on a lot to be an urban place. In the US, when we start to develop places that have irregular shapes and aren't perpendicular, we end up with a lot of liminal space. So even if you have a swale or some green space, it ends up not really serving the attractability of the area in terms of wanting to exist in that space. And when we look at our official map and how it's going to interact with anything along Williston Road, how we're going to improve that side of the road is going to involve a lot of lot reconfiguration and merging lots. So the lines we have now that are all at strange angles, I don't think are going to support anything. Yes, in Europe, you do have old organic streets at weird angles, and the buildings are built at weird angles, and people walk around there because it's beautiful. We don't build that beautiful anymore. This is a Strode area. We're flirting with 30,000 vehicles per day. The city has no plan on how to reduce that in the long term. I said this when you were approving the municipal plan 3 to 4 years ago. I actually take some umbrage with how it describes supporting high throughput, but also making it part of a downtown area. Those are mutually exclusive. You cannot do them both. You can't, I mean, you could try to find a place that does them both, but when you look at places with high traffic and lots of people, like the Vegas Strip, right, there are bollards. Bollards line the road because there's just so much danger to people existing near cars like that. And so I really want to stress that Williston Road is not going to be a downtown. It's a road you might get through. It's a road you might take to access the downtown or get beyond it, but it will never really be a good functioning part of the downtown. The important piece is to make sure that we can cross it safely and have a safe, comfortable crossing that is convenient to get to the other side once that side redevelops at a much denser level than what we have right now. And it'll have to, we can talk about infill, but the buildings are at weird angles. There isn't lot connectivity. Those things won't infill naturally and create a better system. When we look at the lower targets of reducing the number of curb cuts, right? Those are going to be big redevelopment projects. I think when we look at where might it go in the long term, we still have this whole section being fairly available, but the closer we are to the Dorset Street intersection, the more likely we are to have traffic issues backing up there. And right now, it doesn't back up too badly because it's given so much priority, which contributes to Dorset Street backing up, but we don't know how those timings are going to change in the future. So I think getting more distance from it in the long term is preferential. And it's like there's a house with a business in it right now. I was just looking at the grand list, and it doesn't have a particularly high value. That would be a cheaper parcel to buy and route the access to Williston Road toward. It would also make a straight alignment that would then go past the building where they have already spoken to the owner who is not interested in having it go into in front of their building. So I think looking at those types of thanks for pulling that up, Sean. Those kinds of shifts can be really still very tricky to do in the long term, but probably easier or sooner than waiting for the entire opposite side of the street north of Williston Road to redevelop. Yeah, I'll hold the rest of my comments till the next time. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Ryan. Anyone else? You in the red coat, and then in the purple shirt after.
Hey, I'm Jess Weichel. I also live on Mary Street. And I just wanted to really advocate for not moving the signal to the end of Mary Street. We've been referring to the roadway through the hotel parking lot as a cut through this whole time. And I walk around this neighborhood every day. It is a cut through. People are trying to get as fast as they can between Williston Road and Dorset Street because they're in a hurry. They're not trying to access houses on Mary Street or on Market Street. And they drive quickly. I mean, just tonight on my walk home from work, I saw two people get in a shouting match because they were both trying to drive through that area too fast. Even if Mary Street is inevitably opening up, I don't think redirecting a lot more traffic down it is a good thing. This is the only residential neighborhood in this whole study area we're looking at. I would really just voice strongly that I don't think we should send more traffic that way. Thanks.
I just mentioned one thing about that where Mary Street would intersect Market Street. The senior housing that's right on that corner, and because I park behind City Hall and I do go out that way, and you have to be so careful pulling out onto Market Street there, because there's pedestrians crossing that all the time. And it is a dangerous spot for pedestrians right now. So I would not want to see what happens, especially because you're just coming around a curve there. And that curve adds some real danger there. You have a crosswalk there, but, it's not real visible because of the curve. And I think the same problem happens with Mary Street coming out to Market there. It's kind of a narrow intersection now. It would probably have to be opened up a bit. But it just makes it even worse for pedestrians then. So be careful about that too.
Thank you.
I think Donna brings up actually a really interesting point about the about the geographic area you're talking about. Like, are you considering like where the connections make it through to Market Street? Because it feels like the other end of the problem. Like, if you're opening up an intersection up on Williston Road, like, yeah.
Yeah, good point. And yeah, where the intersection leads to is, just as important as where the intersection comes from, and so, as part of our development of alternatives, as part of our evaluation of alternatives, we'll be looking at, where do those side roads from the intersection connect to? Are they connecting to Market Street, and where and how and in what context?
Put a finer point on that. Would it make sense to be more explicit on we are studying those intersections as well, like the downstream into their sphere of influence? Because I just want to make sure we don't have a situation where, like, oh yeah, well, something will happen down there, but that's outside the scope because it's not in their study area or something.
On that, I want to make sure that this doesn't become a kind of network study is a really important part of that. That is a really different animal and isn't something where we could go straight into a design or making some of the changes in the shorter term. The network study is a much larger scope and scale. And so if recommendations come out of this that say these many different connections on Williston Road need to be re-examined, we recommend they move into these different locations. There would be the acknowledgement of all of those, of the implications and things that need to be looked at further. But things like moving a road on the official map is something that would take longer, and especially longer if it were to fully move. So those types of recommendations are going to be something that would have to be within a greater context, because this study, we really need to make sure that we're staying in the study area and focusing on the Williston Road end of it, but then being able to say, okay, we're actually now needing to re-examine the network as a whole and would be able to do that separately.
Yeah, I mean, I totally hear that we can't. This is not a full-on network study. I guess it's more that how do we make sure we don't just solve a bottleneck here and then immediately open a way worse one. But like, essentially, before we can improve this intersection, we need to do some smaller fix somewhere else. Like, can that still be?
I think to that extent, yes. If the recommendation is put the signal in, I want to make sure I'm not saying that this is the recommendation, but if we were to say put the signal at the end of Mary Street, I think with that there would definitely be something that says this means that you're incentivizing traffic to go this way, which has these downstream effects. So we recommend doing XYZ on the Market Street end, but not that we are inherently looking at the whole of Mary Street in that example.
Yes, or I guess it's more what I'm trying to push at is saying, not say, oh, this is something that needs to happen. Say, this needs to happen before we can make this improvement on Williston, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. If they're very intertwined like that, then yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sure. I guess perhaps I don't I guess I don't fully understand why we're capping it to a study area, but then I guess maybe I guess I want to see something to be clear that we are also this project is contingent on making sure that we don't introduce worse problems elsewhere as a direct result of this project and solving those problems before we do something here, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Not just identify that as a problem or we're not going to, you know what I mean? Like say like, oh, we're going to add a whole bunch more cars in some place. Maybe we do need traffic calming there and maybe it needs to happen before we make improvements somewhere else.
Yes. In your example, that is exactly what I would say, that XYZ needs to happen before
Okay.
this other thing happens that would encourage more traffic use. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Go on.
Hello, my name's Nick Anderson. I still remain pretty hopeful that by having these other opportunities to get off Williston Road will actually help reduce the impact on Williston Road. You can actually see that in the travel numbers. As soon as you get to White Street or Hinesburg Road, those numbers go from 27,000 down to 17 pretty quick. Obviously, people are using those other roads to alleviate pressure, and I support that kind of intersection of Mary Street and using Mary Street and Midas Drive to just create a real street grid. And I want to make sure that we're still keeping on the table those greenish colored roads that, you know, are the cross streets in front of Windjammer that go all the way across to Patchen Road too. I think we need to keep still talking about those because they are going to help some pressure in this area. It's never going to go away. It's going to be a commuter route, but I think if we can provide a real grid, it'll help reduce those numbers. Maybe to a point where, I don't know what the number is, Sean, you get to where a reduction from 4 lanes down to 3 with a turning lane actually could work, because most of the issues, the crashes, most of the blockages, the traffic, the issues here are folks turning into all of those different curb cuts. So having a central turning lane both ways might not actually have as much of a larger impact as we think, but we've got to get those numbers down a little, and I think that's where supporting those kind of side streets is going to help. I still think we need to reduce curb cuts in this area. Having 2 curb cuts into Zachary's is probably unnecessary. Having 2 curb cuts into Small Meadows, where Leonardo's and things are, is unnecessary too, especially with a traffic light that people can use to get out. So I think continuing to reduce curb cuts in this area is important, and I think reducing left turns in this area is important too. And then again, when you've got a good grid, you can take a right and circle the block if you need to get somewhere. Without a good grid, you kind of don't feel compelled to take a right and go the opposite way if you're going to have to go a quarter mile out of your way. So that street grid will help, but I do think we need to keep limiting left turns as much as possible in this area. And then lastly, any new signal or changes to signal there, I think we need to make sure we're having pedestrian crossing signals on all approaches. At the moment, there's just one pedestrian crossing signal going across Williston Road. And if you're going along Williston Road on the sidewalk, you kind of don't really necessarily know when to cross. Unless you're looking up at the light and you see, okay, it's red, no one's turning there, no one's turning there. Okay, I'll go for it. There's no indication to pedestrians that it's relatively quote unquote safe to cross. So just making sure that at all approaches, we've got the adequate crossing signals for pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, input? Yeah.
Hello. My name's Tim, and I also live on Mary Street. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Tim.
So I'm advocating for speed bumps for that street when and if this opens. And I did a drive around South Burlington last weekend, in preparing for this. There's speed bumps on Mills Ave, Dumont, Old Farm, Shunpike, Patrick, Ladue, Peterson, Barber, Quarry Hitch, Proctor, Hadley, Laurie Hill, and Songbird. None of them lead to a mall, a city center. So, and I believe it seems like it's going to be a speedway. Of course, I'm going to be pessimistic about the construction. But if you don't put speed bumps in there, you're driving through elderly home parking lot where they probably don't have anywhere to cross anymore. You're going to have to put up speed bumps at their, they built a crosswalk for them behind the Jersey barriers. I just don't understand how it's all going to work safely. And also, why is there never outside the box? Getting on the interstate down there at Kennedy Drive to go north or south on 89, all that traffic has to come up to your intersection here. That's making it get like 32,000 cars a day. Or something down by Tilly Drive. Everybody has to get on the interstate through that corridor. I know that's a bigger project and that's a state project probably, but why wouldn't we lobby for it to help alleviate some of the traffic?
Yeah. So you're talking about full interchange down near the high school, essentially.
What's
a full
that?
Interchange?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're down by the old city hall behind it, why can't there be a way to get on an interstate north or south there? People either have to go all the way to Williston or come up Dorset Street to go north or south. That would cut down a lot of traffic, I would believe, but I know that's not the problem here. So.
Well, we're probably not adding it to Stan Tech's list, but I agree. Yeah.
Speed bumps, please,
Thank
and
you.
if this happens.
Ryan, I would like to raise Tim and CJ's speed bumps to raised crosswalks. I know that we're saying that it's a little out of scope when we talk about Market Street, but there's a Market Street crossing. There's a crossing near the barrier at the south end of Mary Street currently, and then there's a crossing of the Williston Road. We've already made engineering plans to make a path along Williston Road. Let's make that crossing at the top of Mary Street a raised crosswalk. It's wider, it's more noticeable, it discourages drivers from going to the neighborhood. If you do it at the bottom by Market Street, it would discourage drivers from going into the neighborhood. Then, for some reason, when the sidewalk was put on Mary Street, it had a green strip until it got to the last house, and then it ran next to the street, which should never be done. Not only can the sidewalk plow not make that turn to clear appropriately, but the plows just put the snow back on top of it, and there's a 17-inch drop on the other side into a storm drain. And then it stops. It doesn't continue to Market Street. It crosses Mary Street to over behind the senior center. Make that a raised crossing, and maybe also fix that janky part of the sidewalk while you're at it. I think doing those types of treatments both act as a gateway and then as another mid-block speed bump that discourage drivers. You would still need at least one more speed bump further up Mary Street. I also really advocate for those small little splitter islands near crosswalks or even mid-block. Basically, a lot of vehicles, when they don't feel like a car is coming in the other direction, they will veer more into the center of the road because you feel that openness, right? Like I said at the last meeting, traffic engineering is like economics. It's more of a social science than an empirical science. And so the way people react to the space matters. And when you put those narrow little 6-inch yellow painted curbs with a bollard on either side, that forces vehicle drivers to pay attention and slow down. They feel restricted. So even though we can't, actually, we might be able to post the speed limit below 25 miles per hour there. But generally the state doesn't let us unless you're in a certain zone. But you can put treatments like those little splitter islands that make the driver themselves want to slow down below what the speed limit is. And I think that kind of accoutrement is really important to deliver for the people who already live there, since there hasn't been too much for planning on how that will be addressed when changes get made. I would be curious to hear from the neighbors how they personally interact with the two different access points between the existing traffic light and with the end of Mary Street. I'm inclined to think that you could prohibit left turns at the top end of Mary Street since there is access to that light, but I don't know if there's a legality issue given that the light is on a private drive. I'd be curious to know that, but also like their residential experiences with having those two access points.
Anything else or other comments? Because it would be nice to circle back to the purpose and need statement so we can kind of circle back on our task. Not seeing anything else. I guess, Kelsey, I have a question for you about process. So, we've heard some comments about traffic calming and speed bumps and things. I know that that's not really part of this scope, which is very different. It's just like a different topic, but related. To me, it doesn't feel like something that would go like into this thing, because this is like planning, scoping versus something that would need to be implemented more quickly. So, like, what do you think the process would be? Would that be a conversation with city council or with public works, or like how would we kind of make that recommendation and pass that information along to see if something could happen there?
So the decision to install speed bumps or something, that's not really something the planning commission usually gets too involved in. It is more at the level of DPW and potentially city council, but more a traffic management, road construction management question that would be generally directed at the Department of Public Works. And people make that kind of request all the time for various, traffic furniture or street design or signage or whatever else directly to Public Works. So I also was not around for the meetings or the decision that was made about opening Mary Street and what was sort of tied to that. But that would be a Public Works question.
Yeah. And that's why I wondered if it was a council question, like if there was some decision making at the council level.
There can be funding related decisions at the council generally, but the sort of professional recommendation about installing something like a speed bump or a raised crosswalk or a raised intersection or whatever it may be is often housed in the Department of Public Works itself.
Right. Which
and I have been.
We do have Erica here.
Yes, and I've been putting down a bunch of these around the traffic calming type things here to be able to do separately outside of this study to look at.
And I guess it's like you're suggesting, it's not really like our purview to make a suggestion, but we've hosted this discussion tonight and it feels like an important piece that's coming out of it. So I wouldn't want that to get lost. So is that something where like I should contact someone in Public Works who would make decisions about that, or is that something that you could?
You would be contacting me.
Okay.
So yeah,
like to officially contact you.
Yes, absolutely.
Tell you that this feels really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. but yet probably not part of the purpose and need statement because that's a separate project, I guess is what I'm feeling, or kind of what I understand of this process.
Yeah, and I think it came up about making sure that the kind of examining some of the network implications of some of these, I think, was an important piece that I was hearing tonight. And so I think something like that can very much be worked into a purpose and need of understanding to not preclude future adjustments is something that I was hearing, either to traffic or development, that type of thing. But in terms of the specific recommendations would go separately outside of the purpose and need.
Okay. So we have up on the screen, so I think one of the goals for tonight was to review this and, you know, if we're comfortable to make a specific motion to approve, you know, if and when we're at that point. Are there questions or suggestions on the purpose and need?
Sure. I'll just reiterate, you know, the purpose and need is a statement that is developed as part of the project definition project or process in order to encapsulate what the project is intending to accomplish and why. Once it is adopted and finalized, it is used to support the development of any alternatives, and it is also used to evaluate how well each of those alternatives meets the purpose and need. Alternatives are evaluated in other ways as well, in terms of safety, traffic, property impacts, things like that. But the purpose and need is really a central component of a scoping study like this.
So I guess just to reiterate, is when it says hotel, it's not both entrances of the Delta. It's the one. It's you're thinking it's just the one that's across from the Windjammer. Okay.
So access controlling the other entrance will be out of scope here.
I mean, we could look at that. It's, you know, the way that the scope was written was that the primary study area was looking at, you know, an intersection within the vicinity of the existing signalized intersection and Mary Street. And then there was the secondary study area to look at access management and ways to support infill and future development east of that area along Williston Road to Patchen Road, Hinesburg Road. But it is right there. And so, you know, looking at access management, you know, in terms of that second drive, unsignalized drive of Delta Hotel, you know, is something that we can look at as part of this.
I guess I have a technical question. Are you doing like traffic modeling of different scenarios when you're evaluating these? And I guess if so, is it like, are you including some of those other streets that we have on the official map? Because there's a lot of different scenarios that you could or couldn't choose as you're kind of doing those evaluations. So.
That's a great question. So we are including traffic analysis primarily specific to the intersection itself and impacts from that intersection to adjacent areas, namely queue lengths. we are not doing, you know, a network simulation to look at different scenarios of what, you know, if these streets were added and these were not, or this axis was over here and this one was not. It's not going to that extent as part of the scope.
Yeah, and that goes back to what Erica had said. It's not a network study. I mean, we had kind of done that. I don't know, Christine, you probably know when that Williston Road study was done and they looked at the different things, but it wasn't that long ago that that was done.
And that is primarily focused on Market Street itself, and did not focus on Williston Road and connections to Williston Road. It was primarily about Market Street and connections to Market Street. Okay, that one is a little bit older, yeah.
Time flies. Yeah. We didn't pick those lines out of the blue. They came out of that study. It's maybe not as new as I think it is in my head, but that's where those connections came from, and that's what I meant with they might not be perfectly placed. So
Those are from 2017.
2017. Okay. A world ago. I'm not hearing any specific changes. I mean, I think a lot of the input we got probably falls within the extremely broad text in the blue box.
Yeah, I guess where I'm sort of sitting is that, yeah, it is very broadly written as it should be, so I don't have any specific objections to any of the text within the draft purpose and need. I think the only thing I'm still a little hesitant about is just exactly how the study area has been defined. Because I've definitely been working on projects for the state where, like, oh, can we switch this? And nope, out of the scope of the area. Like, we can't touch intersections. It's out of our scope, you know. And that's the only thing I'm a little hung up on. But I mean, if no one else is worried about that, I'm not gonna, pick a big stink about it. But that's, I guess I've already made a point, I think, on my thoughts on study area. But yeah, the text I think seems great. Seems great.
I think as an engineer, I also struggle with that. I'm like, I want to see it all the time. But yeah, okay. I know. I'm with you, Colin. They're trying to keep us to draw the line.
Looking for a motion?
Yeah, let's do it. John,
Move to approve the draft purpose and need statement for the Mary Street signal.
Okay, any second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a second. We also have a comment from the audience. Do you want to come up to one of the microphones?
My name is Susan Camerlingo, and I live on Mary Street in the house that my dad built and that I now own. So I know what it was like to grow up on a street that was filled with kids, a very nice, close-knit community. And now it's a quieter street, a nice, close-knit community, great neighbors, a lot of pedestrians going up and down that little street now, especially with all of the buildings we have now. There's a lot of people walking in the street. Some use the sidewalk, but many of them are walking in the street, like what always happened. So yeah, I'm very upset and I'm very opposed to destroying this quiet, sweet little street. And I feel like you have other alternatives. My husband used to say, for decades and decades, why wasn't an exit built on the back of the U-Mall so that people would not have to go out onto Dorset Street and make that lane so backed up because they have to get on the interstate to go north, and which also makes Williston Road gets all backed up. And that's, to me, doesn't seem like a really huge project that would help to alleviate some of the problems. And my other big complaint is what a horrible mess Williston Road is. If anything needs to be done, that needs to be repaved. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we do have the motion on the floor. I'm not hearing any other comments, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and Helen, that was an aye. So
Yes.
we are unanimous. We don't need the roll call.
I'll abstain.
Oh,
if I can
we
do
have an
that.
abstain. Okay, so we need to do a roll call, right? Is that okay?
With Helen online, if it's not
Um,
unanimous, you have to do a roll call.
So okay, so Duncan,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Helen,
Aye.
Colin,
Abstain.
Donna, and me, aye. So it does pass, and it'll be good, Erica, to follow up on kind of what the process might be for traffic calming before the road may or may not be open. So.
We can definitely provide that. We'll be doing all of our construction updates in the coming months anyway.
Okay.
So yeah, I will be in touch about that.
Great, thank you. Okay, thank you all for coming. This was very interesting, lots of data. I love the maps. Yeah, I think that's probably it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
got
to
your
all the public.
work cut
Thank
out
the
for you.
commission. Appreciate it.
Okay, so everyone is welcome to stay. Very exciting next topic is the Hinesburg Road Shared Use Path. We're doing a public information meeting with the same people. Some of the same
Different consultant, but you
I
still
thought
have
so.
me.
Great.
I will give you the introduction here. Drew, do you want me to join the Zoom meeting, or are you going to join?
Sorry.
Do you have it in, or should I just join the Zoom meeting?
It's easiest for you to join the Zoom and be able to
You
do
got
it yourself however you need to.
Oh.
I think if you're plugged in, just connect.
Okay, I was just going to join the Zoom.
Okay, so we have Erica continuing to join us, and if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Drew Gingras with VHB.
Start over.
Drew Gingras, VHB, the consulting engineers on the path design project.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm SB Zoom 2 with no audio. It's just what my name was given.
Yeah, you should be a panelist because you're in the same account that I am.
I don't know how it let me do that.
Oh, it does many things.
Oh my gosh. Go away. We're gonna just have to do it from this way.
Is it like a full screen?
Yeah, that's where I'm headed next.
Perfect. Okay. Alrighty. Well, yeah, as been covered, this is serving as what's known as the public information meeting for the Hinesburg Road Shared Use Path Design project. Just a quick, it's a very brief agenda. I think we developed a presentation understanding we were going to have about 20 minutes, so I intentionally kept it brief. But welcome to answer any questions that come up as I step through the project or at the end. However, we can keep it fairly casual here. So just a quick look at the agenda, kind of a recap of the project, what we're looking at as we develop the design. And we'll do kind of a high-level walkthrough of where the design is at, which is known as the conceptual phase. Summarize next steps for the project, then would welcome any questions and answers and public input on the effort so far. So just a quick look at the project team here. Again, my name is Drew Gingras, serving as a project manager with a consultant on the effort, which is VHB, partnering with Erica and Silken at the city. And then we are supported through the MAS branch at VTrans, which is the Municipal Assistance Section, by Nydia Lugo. And the reason for that is this design and eventual construction effort is funded via a state bicycle and pedestrian grant. So quick overview of the project area. We are looking at Hinesburg Road, also known as Vermont State Route 116, from Williston Road south to Kennedy Drive. And just kind of providing a quick recap, if this project sounds familiar to those on the commission and those in the audience, is because it was studied several years ago as part of the South Burlington Pedestrian Bicycle Feasibility Study Volume 2. And this section of Hinesburg Road was looked at alongside a couple other corridors throughout the city. And where this corridor kind of feasibility study, I believe is how this was framed, was landed, was with a preferred alternative of a 10-foot wide shared use path along the west side of the road. So as was being discussed, there's a couple other ongoing efforts too in the area, which we thought we'd draw attention to, just given quite a bit of energy happening around City Center, Market Street, the Market Street signal, which was Market Street signal. Yeah, should be Hinesburg Road, Market Street signal. Was discussed via public comment on the previous study being presented on, and then obviously the Garden Street Williston Road intersection and just general Garden Street connection study is kind of just nearby with this, but really the looking at what was previously done for public engagement and the determination of a preferred alternative. The intent of a meeting like this, being a public informational meeting, is necessarily to relitigate what is being discussed as the alternative that is selected, that is firm. And so this is really to look at the conceptual design and the kind of impacts and considerations of that. So the project development process being followed as for this study is the VTrans MAS process, given it is funded through a bicycle and pedestrian grant, again supported by the agency. As a result of that, we are required to follow their local projects guidebook and the process therein. And that's kind of laid out on the left side here in kind of higher level steps. There's obviously a lot between the lines, so to speak, but this kind of gives you a picture of where we've kind of been, what has been done, where we're at, and where we're going. And so currently, you know, that feasibility study from 2020 represents that first kind of scoping or feasibility assessment effort, which is incredibly critical to, you know, submitting that application for grant funding, and in this case being successful. From there, we are now working through the MAS process, which is basically design, permitting, resource, impact analysis, and documentation, all to submit what is known as a categorical exclusion, as part of the NEPA process. That is all required to get statewide approval that the project is not having any adverse impacts that. Did you have something? Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you were coming online there. Just to make sure the project is not adversely impacting anything from an environmental standpoint, archaeological standpoint, historic resources standpoint, or if it is, what is being done to either mitigate and or minimize those impacts to the greatest degree. Also part of that NEPA process is re-engaging with the community, which is what's happening today via this public informational meeting. From here, we will, we've currently just submitted that environmental documentation. The review time at the state for that is about 6 to 9 months. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern with that as we await hopeful approval. We're pretty optimistic that we won't see any significant revision as a result of our categorical exclusion submission. But we are here today, obviously, to re-engage with the public about this, the kind of the design where it stands based on the preferred alternative that was selected several years ago. From here, once we do have that environmental approval, we will advance the design through what is called the preliminary stage. And what happens from there is we will enter the right-of-way process. We are expecting impacts outside of the state right-of-way. And so that is kind of a, oh boy, I don't know how to quite describe it. Not so fun process, just in terms of paperwork, titles, parcel delineations, potential acquisitions, etc. But recognizing that as we advance the design, minimizing those impacts outside of the state right away will obviously be a kind of a critical path task that lays ahead. And then from there, hopefully we get right away approved, the preliminary design approved, we advance to final design, and eventually we will bid out the project and hopefully construct it. So just taking a quick look at the corridor at hand, just a reminder, we are traveling from the intersection of 116 or Hinesburg Road and Williston Road or US 2 south to Kennedy Drive. And we are targeting the west side of the road for this new bicyclist and pedestrian shared use path. Currently, there is a paved, I think we can call it a sidewalk. It varies about 4 to 5 feet wide, but it is outdated. You can see over time, the city has made accessibility improvements. There are marked crossings. There are detectable warning surfaces at those crossings, but there's uneven surfaces. There are utilities in the area, which will obviously impact the work that we're doing pretty significantly. As you can tell, the existing sidewalk is pretty proximate to those utilities, and so anytime you're widening an existing facility, you are going to be impacting those things that are immediately adjacent to it and or seeking to avoid them entirely. But as you can see on the image all the way on the right side here, if you can't go left in one case, you got to go right. And just because you have to go right doesn't mean that's going to be terribly friendly. So we have some interesting topographic conditions as well along the corridor. This is particularly in the south end as you're approaching the gas station, where we have utility impacts as well as some pretty significant side slopes there that will seek to accommodate or minimize the impact to make sure we can accommodate the path that we're designing. See, I've touched on a couple of these, but sometimes it's good just to see what is out in front of us. Oftentimes, shared use path designs can feel like a fairly straightforward task, especially when you consider, significant intersection projects or new roadways or repaving efforts like we just experienced on along 116. But it's when you get into those kind of the minutia and those finite details where you can really find the intricacies and the design challenges. So a lot of what we're dealing with, fortunately, though, is nothing we haven't seen before. But like any other project, there are unique challenges particular to this one, namely, the increase in impervious surface is going to exceed the state limit of 1/2 of an acre, which will require what's known as a stormwater management or an operational stormwater permit. And that will require us to treat any new kind of quote unquote new stormwater being created by that expansion of impervious surface. And so that is in and of itself a challenge, especially on a constrained and flat site that does cross a watershed. So that has been a challenge that we've been working on with our stormwater design team. Moreover, at the onset of this study, we did investigate historical and archaeological resources, and we did discover that there are registered archaeological sites along the corridor. And so, unfortunately, they are in the area where we would need to install stormwater treatment. So we've been seeking out ways to minimize that impact and or address it via investigative excavation, which is set to take place in the spring. A couple other things too, we did explore the opportunity to do some fairly significant utility relocation with Green Mountain Power, given the potential impact to their utilities along the west side of the road and the sensibility and opportunity to relocate some of those above ground utilities to the east side of the road, given the amount of right-of-way and lack of pedestrian and bicyclist facilities competing for space on the east side. So that is another thing. And then we are, given the narrow right-of-way, anticipating impacts outside of the state right-of-way. So doing what we can to shift the design and accommodate it in such a way that minimizes those impacts to adjacent properties while not compromising the overall design intent of the shared use facility is another significant consideration. So at a high level, these are kind of a stacked role plan of the intended design. I'm going to kind of zoom in on a couple areas, one per each of these layouts, and you'll see kind of what the level of potential impact is, but the intent here is to kind of show you, all right, there was a list of those project considerations. Now, when we zoom in on those, here's what those are actually looking like in practice. So how we've kind of laid this out is along the bottom, you have kind of a legend. That yellow box is signifying the zoomed in site on the upper right or right side of the page. And then the image on the left is kind of just a representative image of the existing condition out there. Excuse me. So for example, this is just north of the Citgo station where we are right adjacent to those steep slopes. We have utilities in that area. Given the proximity to Hinesburg Road and the need to be at least 6 feet, or the recommendation to be at least 6 feet from the travel lane, which means 6 feet from that white stripe. Looking at that, we can't really shift or widen the existing sidewalk toward the road. We need to go away from it. So what you're seeing kind of represented in this on the right side in this zoomed in image, particularly with that kind of green fill, is the anticipated area of impact that would result from constructing this path. So you can obviously understand when we widen that pavement, just because we widen it doesn't mean that's where the project ends if the site conditions to the side of it don't really agree with that change you're proposing. So in this case, we would really need to explore some sort of slope stabilization, because cutting into that slope would make it too steep to reasonably and safely exist next to the path. And so we would need to put in some sort of retaining structure or stone fill, which is kind of what you'll see on steeper side slopes to reduce and or completely mitigate any sort of erosion risk. And so what we're seeing here is not really a change to the landscape. The crossings are staying the same. It's just a widening of that sidewalk and then kind of managing the impact of that to make sure it is still reasonably constructible. So as we continue north, we're now kind of looking at the paired offset intersection of Woodcrest and Prouty. So you can see we're getting a little bit more into the denser residential area. Again, thinking about that minimum separation from the roadway is critical. One of the early discussions with the design team as well, the latest design guidance for best practice with shared use path design says you only need 6 feet from that shoulder stripe. Well, if we did 6 feet from that shoulder stripe, that would leave us with a 4-foot shoulder, which we are not going to touch, given the road was just repaved, and that is the current design standard for a state-owned roadway. That leaves us 2 feet, and when you think about 2 feet and what that permits you, in a place like Vermont where growing grass can be difficult and snow storage is incredibly important, that 2 feet didn't really get us what we wanted. So we determined as a design team with the city that maintaining at least 4 feet of a grass buffer adjacent to that shoulder was going to be important for the purposes of this project, because this is going to be a wider path to plow. Obviously, we'll need to plow the road in wintertime conditions, and that snow needs to go somewhere. Moreover, if you have this kind of nondescript space between a paved road and a paved path that's only 2 feet wide, you can't really do much in there, and it would kind of feel like a wide shoulder, which we want to avoid on a road as high volume as Hinesburg Road in this particular site. So we made that design decision to maintain that 4 feet buffer, and so what we're seeing here is going to be a little bit more impact or kind of area of construction outside of potentially outside of the state right-of-way. So we wanted to use this representative photo here. We are cognizant of some fences that are either within state right-of-way or right on that state right-of-way line. You know, I think it's worth noting here that if we are going to be impacting elements like that, we would seek to relocate those fences as part of this project, in the interest of kind of being sensitive and being, neighborly as we can to make sure that we get in this kind of critical initiative of the city to make this a shared use facility, while obviously not negatively impacting existing property owners along Hinesburg Road. And lastly, as we kind of approach the Williston Road intersection, I will kind of track back to one of the earlier remarks I made. This design is what's known as conceptual, and I think it's important to note that that means it is well within reason that it is subject to change. It is what's known as 30% design. So basically we have 70% of the project left to design, so to speak. this is an interesting location that we've been discussing quite a bit with Erica and the team at the city about the need for that right turn lane into the Commerce Square, or otherwise known as Price Chopper Plaza. And so we're looking at that because we see benefits to potentially utilizing that space for the path to mitigate impacts to that property, to not relocate the existing stone wall, as you can see in the photo, and to just kind of create more space at that intersection, which is going to be redesigned. I think that being redesigned as part of the Garden Street effort, or just
that's the
White
project
Street
in 27.
Okay. So a little just worth noting, what you see here might not end up being exactly what is designed, as there are still several ongoing discussions, and this is a good example of that. So where we go from here, as I kind of touched on earlier, we just submitted our NEPA, the categorical exclusion, to the state. We're anticipating about a 6 to 9 month review there. Upon receipt of those comments, we will move into that preliminary design. At that point, we'll know what we need to know from our archaeological resources investigation. We'll know what we need to know about that right turn lane at the Commerce Square Plaza, and we will hopefully have a much more refined design that we can submit back to the state as preliminary. Once that is approved, that gives us a pretty good idea of the overall footprint of the project, and that's when we hit a point where we're comfortable moving into that kind of right-of-way phase, where we are having conversations with adjacent property owners about any potential impacts and either mitigating or minimizing those, and what they'd be willing to work with us on. Once we are through with that and we have right-of-way clearance, that's when we advance into final design and eventually bidding and constructing the project. So with that, I realize that was pretty rapid fire. I'd be happy to answer any questions from the commission and or from those in attendance here today.
Yeah, anybody, Colin? You want to start us off?
One quick comment. I noticed in the that in the original like alternative analysis, there was discussion over adding crosswalk at right court, whatever the full name is. And I wasn't seeing that in conceptual plans, and I particularly bring that up now because last year the bus got reoriented here. So previously the bus stops were on the west side of the roadway. Now they're all on the east side of the roadway. So I think we just want to make very certain that there's this new problem that's coming out here too, that all the bus stops are on the wrong side of the road from this thing, and just making sure that that pedestrian connectivity to these newly recolocated bus stops is there. Yeah, thanks.
I brought up the right court one specifically with VTrans when they were coming out to repave and throughout their plans through there. It is something we'd have to get approval. We'll have to get our permit from the state to build this, the 1111. And so I have requested that right court crosswalk during the Hinesburg Road repaving. I was turned down multiple times.
Interesting.
Both sets of plan reviews, I provided that feedback. And so it's something, especially with the bus stops, it is an opportunity for us to say, hey, this context has changed.
Was that pre or post of Green Mountain Transit reorientation?
It was very similar timing because
Interesting.
it got paved last summer.
Yeah.
And the bus changed last fall. So, yeah.
Interesting.
I have two comments on, it's the area near the Sitco up there where there's the slope. Yeah, this one. I don't love the idea of a stone fill or like riprap slope there. It's like a pretty unattractive treatment. So I don't know, like it looks like you've got that gray line, which may or may not be a retaining wall, but like if you have to pick between the two, like a retaining wall would be nice because it's already not the most attractive location through there. It's kind of one of our gateways of the city, you know, as people are kind of coming on and off Kennedy and maybe from the airport. And so I don't know. I just don't love the idea of a riprap slope. It's poor habitat value. And then also I see that you write about the overhead utilities being moved to the other side of the road. Like, is there any way they can get buried? Like just
very hefty amount of
moving
money.
them to the other side of the road. It's like not a great like not a super exciting option.
Yeah. I mean, I would love it if everything could be covered under a shared use path design project, but I'm not sure undergrounding utilities was really part of the cost consideration there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's something to like get a piggyback grant for or something, just to like, because there's some resiliency to that. And if you're running new lines and moving them, wouldn't it be nice to just get it to that next level of taken care of?
No doubt about it. Yeah.
So I know that's probably not you, but
Yeah.
I do wonder if it's a conversation that Public Works is having. Like, are there possible resources to maybe have that timing? I mean, you're a few years out to when they're digging things up. Maybe there's enough time to think about it.
Yeah, we haven't had the conversation on this stretch of Hinesburg Road. Again, since it is one that's a state owned, there's always a limit to what we can ask for from the state. But I think it is something that I can definitely see a bit more. We have a pressurized sewer made, a gravity sewer, and a water transmission underneath Hinesburg Road in this stretch. So I will say it's pretty crowded underground. But that's not to say there isn't space. We would just have to get creative about where that space exists. But it's something, yeah, I can look at separately and see what opportunities are there.
I think just to speak to the prior comment, the kind of retaining wall versus stone fill, I definitely hear you. I think the stone fill is seen as more of kind of a value engineering option. The cost for any sort of construction work is only going up and will continue to go up, especially by the time this is ready to be considered. So that is, I mean, I think we could carry the retaining wall option through to final design, but then if we do see a cost that is astronomical and or out of budget, or not reasonable to even go after further grants for, those are one of the things that we would look at to kind of value engineer. Where do we have opportunities for cost savings? But our intent would be to carry the retaining wall, to your point.
And I guess if you need to go that route, it would be really nice if it was covered with grass. I mean, that is an option. I know V-Trans is using that more and more often on their embankment. So, having it be stone with grass, or other plants, some kind of pollinator plants of some kind.
Like between the stones?
Yeah, you cover the stones. So I work on the rivers next to the road. So like all of the road embankments that are next to our rivers, like we're doing grubbings and native seed on the embankment, like after putting the rock on. So it's
being mindful of maintenance and upkeep is just one thing I'll flag there, but certainly not reason not to do it. But
I mean, it would look pretty much exactly like it does right now.
Right.
Like it would just have rock under it.
Yeah.
So.
Yes.
What would be the tallest that retaining wall would be in that area? Doesn't look like it's a bank, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it would not be that tall, and that area of impact that you see going backwards is actually more of a construction impact. It's what you kind of need to cut back and then backfill the wall with suitable material. So I don't have that answer. I can't really picture the cross sections off the cuff, but I don't think it's that excessive. Maybe 3 to 4 feet high. It would not be that tall.
Yeah, just in terms of treatments for it, I'm just wondering if the Public Art Committee might be interested in a location like that, because it's a really visible location in a different part of the city than sees much art, except on the walls of the the pumping station, station and everything. But it strikes me, I've been in places where they've done some really creative things with retaining walls, sometimes even using recycled materials. It could be a nice statement. It's a statement kind of a thing if you could use recycled materials.
Helen is online with her hand up.
Helen, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just wanted to support your comments, Jessica, about the retaining wall versus a bunch of rocks thrown there. But I recognize the cost. I also have been reading that Green Mountain Powers really has a fairly robust program of putting power lines, underneath the ground. And I don't know, this probably isn't one of their high priorities because we don't seem to have big trees that take down power lines in South Burlington too often. But that might be an avenue of collaboration for putting the lines underground.
Thanks, Helen.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad we're working on this sidewalk because during COVID, I walked on it all the time and it was horrible.
Yeah.
So.
Any other commissioners items? We don't have a formal action, so it's mainly feedback.
Right.
Anyone in the audience or joining us online? In the purple shirt and then the red shirt, you can come up.
Howdy, Nick Anderson. I just want to give full support for this. We need it, and we needed it 6 years ago, and I would love to see it happen quickly. And then I want to provide some support in terms of I think the city should be strong when it comes to right-of-way negotiations with neighbors. I know we want to be good neighbors, but there is that brand new fence that's less than a year old, and the photograph that Drew showed that is either on or very close to, and I think we should be strong in terms of moving things as opposed to having concessions. Same with there's 2 brand new trees that got installed a couple of years ago up near Price Chopper. A couple of silver birches, but I think if we're going to make concessions as a city, we should make concessions for very large things like 100-year-old maples, not 5-year-old or 2-year-old things. So stay strong. Thank you.
Our arborist got pretty creative with how we can work around that big tree also. Yep, that's the one. He's very excited about how to potentially trim roots without killing the tree.
Right.
Move away from you move away from the fun stuff at some point in your career. So I don't blame him.
Ryan speaking. I don't know if this city has a rule about how close you can install fences to public infrastructure. I know other cities I've been in have rules about like 2 to 4 feet based on things like plowing snow and just like the other plowing issues when they're off track. I don't know if we have that. If we don't, let's pass it. Back up, Nick, on that to make sure that we don't have fences so close to the path that we can't even remove the snow from it. I really appreciate the work that they're doing on this. I feel so much of the concern that Drew is stating when we talk about having a green strip wide enough to accommodate the needs of that thoroughfare when we are trying to plow both the sidewalk and the road. That small space fills up so quickly. And it's unfortunate we couldn't get the state to narrow the road with no shoulder and help us slow down traffic there beforehand. But there are some places where I still feel like we might be able to tweak some more improvement out. When I look at the very southern end of this, obviously that adding that 4th lane to the road to turn right or westbound, that keeps shifting things over. And so I can see that they're trying to not have the path go at a weird angle, but I think that corner wedge of grass doesn't really serve the business owner anyway, and it would be a huge benefit to us if we could move that path even further in away from the road. The road's 50 feet wide there. 36 of those feet get plowed over toward the path side of the road. That is a huge need for snow storage, plus the fact that it's an intersection adds to the buildup, and then you have the drive for the sick go there. So any more advancement into buying more right-of-way there to get the path moved away and have a nicer intersection treatment with the path on the next street would be awesome. I know that the Market Street intersection just went in and we're not going to get anything better there, but when I look at the Price Chopper one, and you've talked about possibly reducing a road lane there, I think those turning radii are like 30 feet, as if you would need to accommodate a semi-truck. And I don't know if there's a way for us to limit, we're redoing Midas Drive. Like, is there a way that we can limit those trucks to only access from Midas Drive and therefore make those radii 15 feet instead of 30, because that crossing right now is like 70 feet, which is wild, and just, you know, counterintuitive to having like a safe feel to it. So I would love to see something different happen there, or to get the path moved further from the road, which I know you're trying to avoid because of the rock wall. But, you know, we're always crossing in these big radii that make the crossing distance longer and allow vehicles to turn at faster speeds. So we have these, like, this double-edged problem when we have our paths so close to roads like this, as we do all along Dorset Street as well. So anything that can either shift us back or reduce those turning radii makes such a huge difference. And the last thing I will ask for and plug are, there's a lot of streets that were getting crossed there. Could any of those be raised crosswalks, perhaps? Just going to say that for a 5th time tonight, and at every meeting going forward in perpetuity. I really want to see that become the expectation at some point, whether we do that through city policies or if we just get out in front of that on projects early enough. I think that makes a big difference, especially in either of those commercial driveways, but even the one right below Ibby. I don't know why I'm blanking on it. Barrett, because it does feed so much of a neighborhood that it does have a higher volume passing through that, even though it's technically neighborhood traffic.
Thanks, Ryan. Any other comments or thoughts? Okay. Do you have anything else for us?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the commission's comments and those from the public as well. And yeah, I'll just say, I think anytime we're introducing something like this that is inherently a significant dynamic change to the way a street works and kind of serves its traveling population, we are very sensitive to the things that Ryan was touching upon, you know, speed management at crossings. One of the things I'll note is just there's fairly new guidance for designing side paths, particularly in contexts like this, with a high priority that places a high priority on sight lines and making sure that user right of way at those locations is clear, and then doing what you can to mitigate the cause for severe conflict where they might not be. So that is certainly front of mind for us as we are designing this to make this side path as safe as possible, particularly at those side street intersections. So with that, I'll just leave this up here in case anybody wants to connect with Erica or I. But again, just a quick reminder, we're in a little bit of a holding pattern, so it is great time if you do have any more thoughts, ideas, questions that come to mind to reach out. Now is a great time in the process.
This will be great.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you very much. Kelsey, I know the next thing on the agenda we've pushed off like 4 times already.
Yeah, so if it's all right with the commission, I would like to do it. It should be very quick.
Okay. We've read it in our packet 4 times.
You've read it, you've seen it, you've absorbed it. My computer has died, so I can't give you any more detail on anything. So just moving in quickly into that next agenda item, this is primarily an update to the Planning Commission about how Paul and I have been strategizing how we want to approach the different requirements for applying for Tier 1A status under Act 250. So there's been various guidance documents that have come out over the past year about this is shifting to the historic resources requirement. It is not a historic preservation requirement, and it goes more into detail in the memo. It is about being compatible with, kind of not competing with historic structures, but does not require preservation. So it is not the same as a historic district or something else, which some municipalities in Vermont definitely have. The guidance from the Land Use Review Board has given us 4 options. As explained in our memo, we've looked at them all and decided that the one that fits South Burlington is what we're calling 3B. It's the third one. It's the second kind of part of the third one. And that's primarily after reviewing the statute, reviewing the LURB guidance, and then discussions with LURB members, individual LURB members, so not the opinion of the whole board, but with individuals, saying that part of the reason why they had those four options is not to say that one is better than the other. It's not a tiered list. It's not like this is the best and this is the worst. It's to fit it into what municipalities are already doing and how they're dealing with historic structures. So for the whole list of reasons that I included in the memo, and I'm happy to answer questions about any of them, we believe that we can make a pretty strong case with how we've already regulated and the changes that we've made in the last 3 or 4 years to our land development regulations, that we are meeting the requirements of the statute to be consistent with our historic structures. We don't have a district. We do have historic districts in South Burlington because the state defines them as multiple buildings in a single space. So things like the Swiss Host Motel are actually a district. But we don't have it in the more common layperson like version of like, oh, a village or a downtown or something like that. We don't have that core. Our historic structures are more scattered than that. But when we've looked at them, they are consistent with the areas that they are in, and they're consistent with the zoning and the regulations that we have put on those areas and citywide. So for example, somewhere where we have a historic structure and then it's in the LSN area and our height is capped at a certain height, that is still consistent with having that historic structure that is 2 stories in that area. So you're not suddenly, wildly varying from what was built historically in that area. There are a few places where it's a little bit of a further jump than others, but we don't think that it will be a problem to pair up the district specific regulations plus the citywide regulations that we've put in about walkability and pedestrian access, design, frontage and city center, things like that encourage some things that are more consistent with a historic settlement pattern than what South Burlington and most of the country has been doing for the last 30, 40 years. That's my very quick version. But you've seen the same memo a few times in your packet. If you have any questions tonight, I'm happy to answer them. You're also welcome to email me if you have any questions or concerns, but it was primarily to keep you all in the loop about how we're approaching one of the requirements for Tier 1A and making sure that there's not some sudden huge red flag that you completely disagree with how we're planning to do this. Yeah.
Reading about the Swiss Motel.
Yeah.
What implication does that have for what can be done around, was that White Street, right?
Yeah, it is around White Street. Not a lot. It's not, as I said, it's not a preservation related thing. Being state registered has its own state related requirements, but the area that is not registered, so off of that property, you can develop basically as normal, and that's the case we're making, is that when you're developing as normal under our regulations, you are still consistent and are not being sort of off-putting to the historic structures that are nearby.
Anything else? I think it seems like a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not hearing anything different, so lots of nods.
Great. Yeah, and the upside to this is that we don't think we need to be making, there may be a few places in our regulations where we may need to add a reference or something else very small, but we're not going to be needing to put a whole new section, so that keeps us on track for applying for Tier 1A. And obviously, if we start writing this all up and figuring out all the bits and pieces, I have already gone through and identified the sections of the LDRs that that fit into those categories I included in the memo. But once, there could always be something that shakes out that we go, ooh, that's a sticking thing that we want to tweak or change. So I'm not saying it's out of the question, but I'm thinking it's unlikely that you'll be seeing an LDR change in a sort of major policy way in this area.
Great. Okay, I think that sounds great. Nice job, Kelsey. I'd like to make the motion to approve the Planning Commission minutes from February 10 and 24 of this year.
I'll second.
I think we'll call John the second. on
John
that
won
one.
the second.
Okay.
Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
That was unanimous. No roll call. We did have something from Winooski in there if anyone wants to talk about it. Hearing none. I do want to address the schedule. I have a work management training thing during our first meeting in April. April 14, so I'll miss that one.
Michael is also missing that one. So if anyone else is going to be missing April 14th, please let us know as soon as you can, because we're already down to 5, and if we have less than 4, if we have 3, then we don't have a quorum, so we can't lose too many more. So if anything comes up, just let us know as soon as you are able. Or even, night of, send an email, I'm sick.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Very good. Then we are adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Very nice. That was a very fun conversation.